joined us today, audience. We are in the middle of the Business of TV Forum, part of our Future of TV Week here at Digiday Media, and I'm James O'Brien. I'm the president of Custom, that's the custom content team. We've been working closely with Mountain for almost a year now on a variety of topics that take us deep into CTV as not just an emergent, but a rapidly dominant way of reaching audiences, of taking a channel apart and putting it back together so that performance marketing and brand marketing can converge and do their thing together in a single unified approach to campaigns, which is probably revolutionary in the TV space. And what we have today is a session with our good friend, Mark Douglas, who's the CEO and president of Mountain, which has had an extraordinary past year, especially extraordinary past 6 months. I'd say since about the Super Bowl, things have been pretty explosive over at Mountain. And yet you've had a long game point of view, Mark. You've certainly stepped into the world of digital marketing early and often with Oracle and a number of IPOs and acquisitions as a result of successful startups. You've been the VP of Technology at eHarmony. You've worked with the Rubicon Project as the VP of Engineering. You've seen it from the trenches and you've seen it from the captain's chair. Take us into what you see. We're just about at 2H 2022. What has changed as you've watched this CTV evolution / revolution take root? What's an example? What illustrates how differently marketers are approaching TV now because of CTV being this cost-effective channel to audiences that maybe were cost prohibitive to reach prior?
Yeah, so I think that's what has actually changed, is that television has previously been this medium accessible to at most a few thousand brands, while you've had kind of digital advertising, meaning paid social and paid search and all these other channels, which are accessible literally to millions. And so what's happening with television is there's essentially this democratization happening. It's opening up of TV, this really powerful medium, which is now becoming more and more accessible to brands of all sizes. That's what kind of is a big focus of Mountain, is opening it up to a lot of brands. And I think it's goes even beyond us. It's just the medium itself, making it measurable, making it targetable, bringing television's very brand safe channels, just a fit now for a lot more companies. And it's kind of an exciting time, not only for the consumer, which has gone through this big revolution, but now you have companies like Mountain that are essentially bringing a revolution in terms of the relationship between the advertiser and now television. So that's what we're excited about. And that's what most companies I talk to are excited about.
We'll talk about some of those companies that you've been speaking with and watching, and your teams have been coaching, I imagine, as well. You brought up the word democratization, and I think that's in general always a positive. However, it's a complicator as well. When you democratize, you allow access, or you enable access to tools and approaches and outcomes that are new to some teams and not so new, but maybe slightly different to other teams. What have you seen happen to the video creative that's flowing through the TV channel, specifically the CTV channels, because of that democratization? How is the actual DNA of the video creative altering as all these new players come in and work with this new space?
Yeah, well, previously, like basically the sheer size of the budgets you needed for TV were a big obstacle to companies approaching television, or even figuring out how to approach the medium. What's become the biggest obstacle, or one of the biggest obstacles, is creative. For Mountain, about 2/3 of our customers are first-time television advertisers, so which we're excited about, essentially working with companies who are new to TV for the first time. And they generally don't have a 30-second television commercial or 15-second television commercial. They often have web video, like something for paid social, like for Instagram or TikTok or something like that, but they just don't have a TV commercial. And so that's been a big problem and a surprisingly big obstacle, because the price points for TV commercials are tuned for like large budgets, major brands, and not tuned, even a reasonable budget, just hundreds of thousands of dollars. You don't want to spend the exact same amount in developing the commercial. And there's an expectation that you don't spend $500,000 creating an ad for Instagram, right? And so you shouldn't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's been the biggest obstacle. It's an obstacle that at Mountain we've really tried to focus on. We acquired Maximum Effort last year, and Ryan Reynolds is now the Chief Creative Officer. Mountain, we acquired QuickFrame, which is, you can think of almost like Uber for creative. QuickFrame connects basically the creators with the brands. And what we're trying to do is to make TV more accessible by allowing you to get the creative a lot faster, but also get it at a price point at an effective cost that is really reasonable. I think that's a big obstacle for the continued growth of CTV if you want to grow beyond just bringing linear budgets to connected television, but really open up the medium itself. And so we're tackling that. I'm sure other companies are thinking about that too.
That's fascinating. When we talk about disruption, and we often use it as a sort of, it's a word that means a number of things, and underneath it must be a bunch of different things that happen. But I love the fact that you've dialed us into one of the natures of disruption is that it throws cost and price into disarray as you move from the past to the present and then begin to set up what will be the future. Within that, I think that there must be some emergence of the early adopters who got traction, and I think we refer to those as challenger brands, an early adopter who got traction, not one who fell off the cliff when they tried to climb it, but actually got up on the cliff and are now standing with some of the bigger players that have been there for longer, that maybe are enjoying budgets that they're used to spending. What's an example there? What's maybe a telling example in the time that you've been working in the space in which you've seen a challenger brand take on the established formats and players and make something sort of incredible happen, or remarkable, or something that stands for the next step? What's an example of that?
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing, because our customer base is predominantly new advertisers who are brands who are new to television. We have a few of them. One that comes to mind is Bolt, which we teamed up with recently, and Maximum Effort created, using our Crave as a subscription, basically built creative for them, and they're in the finance space, fintech space, and I think growing very quickly. And what's interesting about this story, they just would not have approached television at the age they are as a company before. We did work with 1Password recently, who's doing a large campaign on our platform, and the product speaks for itself. I mean, you just basically have to, the name is the value proposition for the company, so that really lends itself to television. A more traditional brand, somewhat of a challenger brand, but a traditional space, is Build.com, which is kind of like an online Home Depot. And they have many brands. So I think a lot of people work with them and not even realize it, but like Faucets Direct and Build.com, and just essentially in the home improvement category. So we're seeing kind of what's happening is that the brands are approaching television on streaming, on connected TV, at a much earlier point than they previously would. And again, it's because they can start with a much smaller budget, they can get creative at a lower price, and then they can, I mean, they're called challenger brands for a reason, and they can kind of start that challenge, I guess you could say.
Amazing. I mean, so two things we've talked about here that I think really help put the definition to what's changing, what does disruption really mean in this space. One is price and cost.
Yeah,
it's a new frontier, and you'll stake your claims, and you'll set your fees according to what you can get or what you can prove. Yeah. The other is that earlier entry into TV advertising across a certain segment of brands that would normally not even consider this as part of their budget. They're looking at a much more direct-to-consumer or performance-oriented event, and now they have that, and they have this, I guess, as you put it, democratized approach, or at least partially democratized approach to how much it costs to get involved. The other side of the coin is that, and I think I forecast this, and I think you just did too, there are established players in the CTV space. It's not just scrappy, young challenger brands. I imagine there are some, and we know of some of them already, but maybe you could take us into a similar example. Some that have stood out as, I guess, what we would call a sort of, we'll put a slash between two words, adopter, adapter, right? So there's the adoption of CTV, and then there's the adapting of that video creative we were talking about. Are established brands just taking their TV commercials and slapping them on CTV? Are they doing something hybrid? Are they reinventing how they approach the video creative? What have you seen as an example of how that established player makes that move into CTV?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about TV, about streaming, is at least in the way we've approached it, is we call it performance TV because it's now targetable and measurable. And so even an established brand, there are a lot of number of very big brands who are really performance advertisers, like direct response performance advertisers, but haven't been using television in that way. So I think of a brand I think is starting to really do a lot on streaming is, for example, United Airlines. And they seem like this brand, we've all seen commercials, right? It's, you know, the planes in the sky, and they and make it that really tell the United story. But at the end of the day, they need to sell airline tickets. They need to sell tickets. And if they can now do that on television, which they were already using as a medium, but do it and measure the impact, measure, you know, not only what the ads they ran, but it, like how many people went to United site, you know, how many have started the shopping process or bought a ticket, things like that. That's going to allow them to commit more money to television. So this existing television advertiser now would be able to commit more to TV because they can measure it. And so money that they might have spent on paid search and paid social can now be spent on streaming, which is, I think, is a much more impactful medium, and is great for any brand like that. So those kind of big, large performance brands that are spending heavily on performance and now can do the same for television because they have the same kind of attribution and targeting, these kind of buzzwords available for TV too. So that's one that comes to mind for me. And there are many like that, like, you know, the Progressive or the Geico or T-Mobile. Any of these performance brands now can look at TV in a new way.
I think that's a really important point you make, Mark, in that when we talk about that convergence of the brand marketing team and the performance marketing team, well, that convergence is predicated on both of those teams existing within a particular marketing infrastructure. A smaller brand is going to have a marketer or two, if they're lucky,
Right.
who are doing all those jobs. So that to them, the convergence is by it started from day one. But it's at the maybe when you and I, when our teams have been talking about performance and brand marketing, we really are talking about larger organizations that have established brand teams and performance
Right.
teams, and those are the teams that are seeing that big transition happen. And so that's an important way to also frame the conversations that we've been having together across the course of the past year, which is that there is a convergence going on. Where is that convergence going on? It may not be an overstatement to put it that those convergences are primarily happening in larger infrastructure organizations where there are multiple teams specializing in different kinds of marketing.
Absolutely. And it's one of the reasons you're seeing television as a whole, the market grow. Even though linear is flat, CTV is growing. Well, it's growing because we're bringing new budgets, new companies into the television market that weren't there before. And those budgets, as I mentioned earlier, often now money that might have been spent on paid search and paid social, and now there's new budget because the more measurable a medium is, the more marketing dollars are going to be spent there. I mean, it's a direct correlation, and it's essentially that simple.
I think that there's one other place we can go today as we're coming up on time. We've talked a little bit about what just has happened over the past several years, and things happen quickly, but they also happen in spells. So there's periods of great activity, periods of relatively low activity in any kind of marketing channel. Right now, we're at about 2H of 2022. We've just had, I think, a spell of tremendous buzz and activity around CTV, and it doesn't look like it's falling away to our eyes. However, we know what the established storylines are to date, and we're pretty comfortable talking about them as we have been in our approximate half hour here today, you and I.
Right.
What do you think is so we've looked at, performance metrics, brand metrics. We've talked a lot, not today, but in general, a lot of talk about creative refresh and taking that video unit and making sure that it is catered and tailored to specific environments, and that it doesn't run too long or too many times without being changed in some meaningful way. Those are all things that democratization of the access and the toolkits and the spend in CTV have unlocked. Are those the dominant threads for 2H and into 2023, or do you see anything else upcoming that's going to really be the commanding story for the second half of the year and into next year when it comes to CTV?
Well, there are two things happening right now. One is, I think there's an old adage in advertising, money follows eyeballs. And I think that is absolutely occurring right now, that you're seeing even almost like a lot of early CTV adoption has been new brands adopting with small budgets. Coming from linear, I think you're seeing this real embrace, companies really embracing streaming right now. And we work with a lot of TV networks, and all of them are talking about that. So I think that's one trend, that like all of the existing linear brands are kind of now really showing up to streaming in terms of how they're approaching their ad budgets. I think the other thing, and this is more of a personal prediction, and is that we might have reached peak upfront. That one of the I read so many stories earlier this year about how this was the biggest upfront ever, and it was like, okay, I'm not sure why people are so excited about discounting and and getting people to commit a year in advance of budgets. I think that the streaming is starting to impact the business models in a very positive way, because if you ask the average brand, no one's really excited about upfront, other than I think the sales reps from the TV networks. I think the market as a whole likes the flexibility of being able to spend even more dollars with TV networks to reach consumers, but do it in a more flexible way. And I guess my personal prediction is that you're going to see a lot more flexibility in the buying process for streaming, all the way up through self-serve, which we do, but with less emphasis on upfront and more emphasis on being able to spend dollars right now. I'll finish one point. One of the reasons I say that is because a lot of what we hear from brands is they want creative that's culturally relevant and right now. So if you want creative that is created in a week or two, you don't want to wait 3 to 6 months on a media plan to deploy it. So I think the flexibility to have fast creative and fast flexible ad budgets is kind of what I think is going to happen in the second half of the year, or is already happening and going into 2023. That's my personal prediction. Peak upfront, we've reached peak upfront, but we'll see.
I love it. I have to tell you, it resonates and echoes with some lateral storytelling we've been doing around development queues, and the idea of people no longer seeing marketing teams in particular, no longer seeing a 3-4 month turnaround time on developing something new for any kind of user experience, whether absolutely. That's an advertising creative or a way to interact with an owned and operated site, as being competitive. That's just not a competitive time frame in the digital space that we now inhabit. So here we have your prediction. We're putting it up. Let's talk again in a couple of months, top of 2023, as we enter the upfront season. You're telling me, and I think it's a reasonable proposition, upfronts, watch out, because the development queues and the expectations are changing pretty quickly toward quicker turnarounds.
Absolutely.
All right. We're with Mark Douglas, CEO and President of Mountain. My name is James O'Brien, President of Custom, and I'm so happy you joined us today, Mark. Please come back and see us again. Please watch for our Mountain work in the year to come, and we're going to pitch back now to the Business of TV Forum. Enjoy the rest of the Future of TV Week. Pleasure to be with you. Thanks. Take it away, guys.